Hello. Thank you for joining us for the inaugural 2021 Traxo webinar we have entitled Uncovering Value in Your Company's Travel Leakage. Over the years, travel has seen major developments and improvements in efficiency, productivity, and ease of use. However, the convenience provided by online travel agencies, meta search sites, and supplier portals, as well as the transition to a do-it-yourself booking option for employees, produced a sizable headache for most corporate travel managers, known as leakage. Over the past 2 decades, leakage has been viewed as an annoyance at best, and at worst, a loss of transparency and control that jeopardizes traveler safety. Up until recently, the only way to solve for leakage was to enforce strict mandates for how and where employees should book. Post-trip reconciliations, driving compliance, enforcement, corrective action, and voluntary forwarding of itineraries have been band-aid fixes, yielding limited results. With the invention of data capture and intelligence solutions like Traxo and reshopping tools for price assurance, travel managers now have the option of uncovering valuable insights hiding in leakage. This newfound complete visibility enhances travel management by improving transparency, control, and compliance. Now, whether your program is tightly managed or not, most of us can probably agree that leakage is already occurring in your organization. Now, you have the ability to turn that leakage into savings for your company, all while being able to unlock value and convenience for your employees. For those of you not too familiar with what we do at Traxo, the benefits can be summed up in 3 words: data, visibility, and control. Medium and large enterprises use us to eliminate their corporate travel blind spots, also known as booking leakage, by automatically aggregating all corporate travel activity, whether booked through their TMC, direct with suppliers, through an OTA site, or any other method, in one place in real time. If you'd like to learn more about how we accomplish this and explore the benefits of being able to receive complete itinerary intelligence in real time from your business travelers, we will provide an opportunity for you to connect with us at the end of this webinar. This office hours webinar is part of a series to help corporate travel managers down this path so they can turn their own travel programs into a strategic asset for their company. A bit of housekeeping before we begin. This webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to view it again if you enjoyed it or would like to share with someone you feel may be interested. To view the recording of this and past webinars, please visit resources.traxo.com. The Q&A feature is open, and this webinar is designed for audience participation through that platform. You have the ability to post your own questions or upvote questions you feel most relevant for the panelists, and I'll be sure to bring them up with the panelists either during or towards the end of the webinar. So without further ado, let's introduce our panelists for today's discussion and jump right in. Jennifer Steinke is a veteran travel manager with a career that spans over 34 years in the corporate travel industry. She is the head of global travel for PPD, a leading contract research organization. Previous roles include leading managed travel programs for DICOM Industries, ACT, US Foods, Crowley Maritime, and ITT Corporation, managing travel spend up to $180 million. Additionally, she has a background in travel management operations, travel technology, travel strategy, and operations development in various consulting roles. Her diverse background gives her a unique skill set in developing world-class managed travel programs. Jennifer holds a master's in business administration, a BS in business management, as well as her GTP and CCTE designations. She is very active in the industry, writing a monthly feature for Business Travel Executive magazine and serving on multiple industry committees and boards, including TAMS, the BTE think tank, and previously sitting on the board of the Global Business Travel Association. Jen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
And John Packel is a serial entrepreneur who spent 9 years in marketing and product development at American Express Global Business Travel, where he was astonished to see the enormous amounts of time people spent on manual processes, including struggling to manage billions of dollars of hotel volume with spreadsheets. After joining blockchain software firm Consensus as a developer and product lead in 2017, he co-founded Smart Hotel Rate with the travel veterans who created Contigo, the duty of care solution they sold to Concur in 2013. Welcome, John. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Greeley Koch is a partner and senior vice president at DigiTravel Consulting. Having served as a global corporate procurement leader, Greeley understands the buyer's needs and is focused on developing new ways of engaging with the marketplace via digital content, highlighting leading solutions, conducting research, and bringing experts together in all parts of the world. he also stays actively engaged with startup companies, keeping his fingers on the pulse of what's next. His experience includes serving as the ACT executive director, as well as leadership roles at HRS and Aquis Consulting Group. Industry accolades include being named a top 25 influential executive and top 30 travel influencers in business. Welcome, Greeley, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, Justin. Thank you for having me.
All right, so Greeley, I'd like to start today's discussion with you. So when we came to you with this webinar idea, I thought you had some incredible thoughts about the topic that would apply to any corporate travel program, no matter how they run compliance, and especially around a word that is quickly emerging in the corporate travel world, yet may not be fully understood, the word omnichannel. So what is omnichannel? What isn't omnichannel? Would you mind sharing your thoughts with us?
Yeah, sure. Let me go through what it is first, right? And first of all, again, thank you for having me because I really enjoy talking about this topic and especially new ways that corporate travel can be booked and managed. So let's start with a simple definition. What is omnichannel? And a simple definition is really to think of a marketplace that the travel leader has authorized multiple booking channels for their travelers to go and book transient travel as well as meetings and events. And all those channels have the same travel policy, the same rates and discounts that will flow through a point of sale data stream that will feed duty of care, payment, expense reporting, so that you really have a true end-to-end business process management, right? So that's the simple definition. So let's just drill down a little bit into that. Okay, so the travel leader authorizing various channels, right? I can remember that when I was a travel buyer, one of the challenges I always had was, controlling my leakage, which I know we'll get into in a little bit more in depth. And so what we're saying now with omnichannel is that the travel leader is authorizing multiple channels from the TMC to brand.com to the preferred suppliers, and their apps and whatnot. These channels, when they're authorized, they're preloaded with the travel policy. They're preloaded with the rates and the discounts. So that way, your experience, no matter which channel you're going through, you'll be able to have that same policy experience. You'll be able to have that same rate and discount. So in essence, the travel leader still has control of the booking, no matter which channel it's going through. And then the end result of all this is now there's advancements, such as Traxo and others, where you can get this point of sale data at the time of booking instead of waiting 30, 60, 90 days for your consolidated data. You get this data right away, which then feeds your duty of care provider, and it feeds your payment all the way through your expense processing. So that's, in a nutshell, kind of what is it? And then I think you want me to,
yeah. Well, when we first got together, we talked a little bit about this, and you were talking about the description, and one of the things you mentioned was the fear of travel managers or travel buyers of, hey, oh my gosh, if I do this, then so I don't want to steal your thunder. So talk a little bit about what you shared on that.
Yeah, so let me just also talk about what isn't it, right? The other part of your question, because I get asked this question all the time when I'm talking to travel buyers as well as suppliers. There's a lot of myths out there. One of the myths is when we mention omnichannel and going through other channels, they're like, you're telling me I have to get rid of my TMC. And that's a myth, because through omnichannel, it's not getting rid of your TMC. It's figuring out what is the right channel for that particular trip that will support it the best. Could be the TMC, and it could be, if it's a simple point-to-point, it could be going to brand.com. So for instance, some research that we've done at DigiTravel shows that 72% of the time, the travelers have gone and done their research before they go through the single channel today, the TMC and the online booking tools. So 72% of the time, they've done the research. They know where they want to go. Either it's a repeat trip. I know whenever I go Chicago to New York, I know which flight I'm taking. I know which hotel I'm going to stay. I know that. And if it's a new city, I'll go and do the research. I'll go and look at all the preferred supplier websites. I'll do all that research in advance. Then I go into the TMC and the online booking tool book it, and then chances are I've got to go back to the preferred supplier to get my seats because I've got status or to get whatever the case might be. So it's a very inefficient system that has been built today, and it's just perpetuated itself. So what we say is that the myth that you get rid of your TMC is false. What's true is that you bring other channels into this, again, feeding them with policy, feeding them with rates and discounts, so that your travelers have the same experience, no matter if they're going through the TMC or they're going to the preferred supplier, brand.com, or the apps, right? They'll have that same experience. Because when I talk to travel buyers, they're like, we've got this leakage, whether it's on the hotel side, which, there's 40% plus leakage on the hotel side, right, on average. So we've had conversations with buyers, and they say, help us get that 40%. And I'm like, well, how many years have you been trying to get that 40%, right? And it's multiple years. And so we're saying, well, instead of trying to continue to fight that battle, why not use this omni-channel, the approved channels, the authorized channels, fed with the policy, the rates, and get that leakage. So now you can have duty of care, and you can make sure that you're getting the rates that you want. So that's kind of what it is and what it isn't.
Right. In our conversations, with our clients and prospects, we hear a lot of conversation about, we need to identify what this leakage is first and foremost.
Right.
But then there might be, valid reasons for booking through a different source or a different channel, or there might not. So each company's approach might differ, might differ, depending on what they decide to do with this data. So. Quick question, Jen. So you run a program at PPD that both travel buyers and agency suppliers could relate to, which gives you the advantage of a diverse viewpoint over how you're working with leakage in your corporate travel environment. Would you share with us your strategic plan to take a look at the leakage in your program?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me. So first and foremost, I just want to say that I wish we could find a replacement for the word leakage. And have maybe a better, more positive spin on it, because every time I hear the word, I cringe a little bit. But anyway, so for those bookings that my travelers are not going through the approved channels, what I'll call it, we've had to sort of look at a multifaceted approach. So at our organization at PPD, we are an in-house corporate travel department, servicing probably 90% of our global business goes through our own internal travel agency, so to speak. So we have a little bit more control, I think, than sometimes you do when you have a third-party relationship. Because as the corporation, as the buyer, I can see all of those bookings. I can identify those non-approved channels, or those things that people are going places, and I know they're not sleeping on the street, right? So hotel is a big issue for us. It's 40+%. In certain markets, not all markets. We have some markets that are really compliant, so we manage that. So we have an approach where we are actively reaching out to our travelers and finding out, okay, why are you not doing this? Why are you not booking? All of that. And I get a variety of answers, everything from I get more points to, oh, I don't know, whatever. They can come up with whatever excuse. I don't think that anyone, and I don't think any travelers probably, in the vast majority of corporations, are trying to do something or circumvent some part of policy. I think they're actually trying to find the best deals. And that's why 72% of them are out there searching all those channels, like Greeley mentioned, because they're trying to do what's in the best interest of the organization. So we spend a lot of time educating our travelers. We're also exploring, what does an omni-channel platform look like for us in our organization? How do we aggregate that data? Like with a platform through Traxo, stuff like that. We're also doing a lot of our tracking of our hotels with Smart Hotel Rate that John will talk about. But for us, we realize we have to touch them at multiple different points in the process. Some of it's educating, some of it's just collecting, and some of it's what do we do with the data once we have that information, and then how do we exercise on it? How do we utilize it in the program, and how do we leverage all of that? Because I can tell you, I had one of my major hotel suppliers tell me that 67% of my bookings with that hotel supplier were being booked direct. I almost fell out of my chair. I was like, well, I want to know where, not tell me who, that kind of stuff. It's there, but when your own supplier is telling you that, and you're like, that's interesting. What money did I leave on the table from a savings perspective, or in our case as a CTD, what revenue potentially could have come back into the organization to help support, just the operations as a whole. So we're looking at it from many, many different angles. And I don't think there is just one perfect solution. You're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, from a TMC perspective. I think you're going to have to accept that you probably in the managed travel program going to have to look at it slightly differently. And I think there's a lot of technologies, that are going to be entering the marketplace that are going to help us do this better. But, we've been talking about this for years. I think it's just a new word, omni-channel. 10 years ago, we were talking about open booking, and maybe there wasn't the technologies out there to help us do that. But now I think the advancements there make it a lot easier for us to obtain sort of the true picture of what our spend is for our travel program.
Hey, Jen, it's interesting you mentioned open booking, right? Talk about your definitions. I can remember when open booking came out and everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is the wild, wild west. You're telling me that I'm going to have to let my travelers go to any channel. Right. So it's kind of like your leakage comment. Open booking, I think, was a bad definition, just as leakage is a bad definition, right? But at least with omni-channel, and if we say, look, these are authorized channels, right? That we're authorizing, you're authorizing that. So those 67% that go direct, I mean, just imagine how much your life would be easier if you didn't have to corral 67%.
Absolutely.
We have so many buzzwords in this industry, and I saw Donna posted in the chat about the challenge for Traxo to come up with something other than leakage. And we have been thinking through that a lot, not only the word leakage, but even the word omni-channel. We thought about off-channel or corporate blind spots, or with regards to open booking, we thought about, direct booking, or just the omni-channel. I mean, so there's so many ways to look at it, so many ways around it, obviously. And it's interesting coming into the Traxo business, we're a SaaS company that just happens to serve the corporate travel space. So we talk to providers and suppliers that aren't in the industry, and leakage takes on a whole different connotation to them. So we kind of have to break it down. I mean, absolutely. I completely agree with you, Jen. And hey, to the audience out there, feel free to send us your suggestions about how we can try to collectively, maybe upgrade that term a little. So thank you for that, Jen, and thank you for that info. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, there was a comment in the chat that I just saw that came up that said, is this potentially the future of the managed travel program? If I was going to look into my crystal ball, I guess, I would say it has to be, because what we're doing now doesn't necessarily work that well. So we need, it's there, and we've got these confines around what the managed travel program looks like, but we can't be, keeping our head in the sand. We have to be thinking about the fact that the technologies that are going to be available to our travelers that sit on like this little device here is there. And the convenience is why a lot of travelers go outside of the program, because they can do it on their phone, they can do it easy, quick, it's just simpler. So as buyers, I would just say you've got to have an open mind to what's happening actually in the managed travel program. And instead of ignoring it, you should be embracing it.
Yeah, and maybe trying to find a bridge between the way people would book their own personal vacation versus the way that they would book their corporate trip. Trying to find some sort of a solution to kind of merge that process, because there's what they're used to on one side and what they're used to on the other. There might be a happy medium in between. I don't know. Something to consider. So thank you for that, Jen. John, we have an eclectic audience here today, being represented by suppliers, travel buyers whose programs are of the heavy mandate, as well as travel buyers who are considering a different hybrid type approach to the travel bookings in their program. So why don't we start with a brief overview of what your company does, and then talk to us about how you fit into a strategy of uncovering value in a travel program's leakage.
Sure. Thanks, Justin. So we started Smart Hotel Rate as a real-time audit tool that runs 24/7 to show a corporation and their TMC how and when the company is getting the rates they negotiated and when they're not. And our automated alerts allow for correction prior to the traveler arriving at the hotel. So rate issues are at least a $15 billion a year problem for corporations, and they're not good for hotels either. So, to Jen's point about we have to start doing things differently. And if, the pandemic isn't an opportunity and to do so, I don't know what is. So Smart Hotel Rate had decent traction a year ago, but the pandemic really allowed us to take a step back and take the opportunity to extend our platform to include hotels, which was one of our original goals. So if people remember nothing else of what I say, I think the critical concept is that it's no longer necessary and thus shouldn't be acceptable for companies to rely on data where their TMC data and their hotel data never matches. So the other point is that with Smart Hotel Rate, we address these issues in the background. So rather than having to force travelers into a subpar booking experience, that used to be the only way that you could get data for duty of care, you could load rates, et cetera. Now you can do things like allow travelers to book directly with hotels, as Jen mentioned, and the hotels can guarantee that the discounts and rates will be correct. So the way that Smart Hotel Rate is able to do this and do it without GDS booking data is actually because of Traxo. So I'm excited to announce our partnership with Traxo today that's empowering buyers and suppliers through the full visibility, which is really the topic of this webinar.
Thank you for that. So how are you fitting into this strategic plan to uncover value within a company's program leakage? And more specifically, I know you are, both Traxo and Smart Hotel Rate are working with Jen. So maybe you could touch a little bit on how you're helping her as well.
Yeah, and Jen can speak better to how Smart Hotel Rate helps her program. But there were at least 3 points that I noted in these introductions that are relevant. So Justin, you made the point about there's often reasons why, or there are always reasons why travelers book outside of the program. But you need the data. Travel leaders and others need the data to be able to look at that analytically, not just sort of anecdotally, people want hotel points, other reasons. You need the data to see who is doing what and when and what it means for your program. And that's one of the things that Jen and I talk about a lot. Jen mentioned leakage differing for her PPD by market. So maybe it's loyalty points or travelers trying to find the best deals. There again, travelers, in my view, shouldn't be scouring the web trying to find the best deals. If, as a travel leader and a hotel partner, you have set this up in the background so you can tell travelers just, do your job. Then when you go to book, we're managing this correctly in the background. So there's a couple of examples.
Very good, thank you. Jen, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's been a really great partnership. I've been, in the industry a really long time, and have always been trying to figure out, just on a rate discrepancy basis, forget about leakage. If I could just get the right rates at the right time when I'm supposed to, that's a miracle all on its own, right? So, and then you combine that with, attacking these, unmanaged bookings, whatever we want to call them. It kind of creates sort of somewhat of a utopia, I guess, for me, and that we're able to do that. It's kind of funny because I get the alerts from Smart Hotel Rate when the bookings aren't booked at the correct rates, and then I go out to my team of agents and I'm like, can you look at this booking and see if there's a cheaper rate? And they think I'm like magical. They think I have some like superpowers. Like I just pull these bookings out of the woodwork, right? But we've been able to see the savings. We've been able to actually identify, we have 90% online adoption. And with our automation, so many reservations go straight through and an agent never sees them. So those rates would never be identified, right? And we may never see that they don't actually have a hotel booked when they're supposed to. So, that's where I think the value has really been a great partnership. And I think there's, more to come in this space for sure.
Hey, Justin, can I add to this? Yeah, because
Please.
I think Jen and John are saying something that is like music to my ears, right? Because, and this is what frustrates me about the industry, because, I started in procurement. I was trained on Six Sigma. It's all about making the process better. right? And if you think
That's
about
a good
it,
point.
all we've done is add layers to this onion, right? If you think about it, with the single channel that we're using for the most part today, when somebody doesn't get their rate at the time of booking, what do? Well, we add another layer. Well, here comes rebooking. All right, another layer, more fees, more suppliers to deal with, right? We just keep adding layer upon layer. And it's time to peel those layers back. Like Jen was saying, why can't I get my rate, at the time of booking, right? Why is this so difficult? So that's why I'm excited about omnichannel, where we have a chance to finally peel back this onion, set up the right channels with the right fee structure. And in some cases, the fees to the corporation are zero through omnichannel. Everybody wins from this, and we simplify the process, we simplify the supply chain, and we make our travelers' life easier. And we get the rates, like Jen, I'm pointing to you, Jen, like you're in my corner of the screen over here. I'm pointing to you, Jen, over here, right over there. And like John is saying down there, that this is what we're trying to get, right? And to this utopia. So I think some people maybe would roll their eyes and say, yeah, we've tried this. No, this is real this time, right? About being able to peel back this onion and get the things that we've always wanted to get with much less grief.
On that point though, I wonder if another way to look at it is, with like the reshopping you mentioned, that might be applicable, but in its lane, where it makes sense, so now you can, identify where everything is happening and then apply the suppliers that help in those areas based on what channel it is, so where it makes sense. And, one of the things that you mentioned, Jen, early on is that leakage, off channel, corporate blind spots, whatever we want to call it, it's not new. It's existed for as long as technology has existed. So this isn't, the conversation about it happening. One of the things that you mentioned when we had our pre-call is it's no longer doing any good to stick your head in the sand and just try to avoid it and just realize that it's an unnecessary evil of the technology of corporate travel today. Now you can actually do something with it. And that's kind of the point of today's webinar is, you no longer have to say, oh my gosh, this is such a headache. They're not booking through the channel that I laid out for them. Now you can say, okay, well, let's find out why. Let's find out who, let's find out why, and let's see what we want to do with it. And you actually have a course of action, to try to sum up what we're talking about here. I don't know what you guys think, if that's a good summation.
I would just add the point.
Go ahead, John.
I would just say that, these layers of the onion, there's plenty in the tech stack and all kinds of things that make things expensive and take time. But it's also, when these layers get added, it's typically, oh, here's another spreadsheet that a person or people on both sides have to go through and try to reconcile. And that's absurd. We have software to do repetitive tasks like that and let people do the creative things. So, okay, what do we want to do with these insights that I'm getting from a tool like Smart Hotel Rate and from Traxo data?
And I think for the buyers that are on the webinar today and those that might listen to it later, I think the technology is what's helping us right now. I think when we were talking about the concept of open booking 8 to 10 years ago, we didn't have some of the technologies that we have in place now that can help us better manage this, right? And so, and I can remember being on the speaking circuit talking about open booking. I've always been a big supporter of it for years. Like, I was like, this could work. Like,
which is interesting because you run a CTD, and so, for you to be in support of that says something.
It says that I like control, however I got to get it.
Thank you. That's great.
My point is, but I want to own it. See, that's the difference. I want to own the technologies. I want to be able to drive my strategy that's not driven by some other third parties. So if I want to go to Smart Hotel Rate or Traxo or ABC or whatever, in my world, I can do that a lot easier than I can in maybe some other setups. But I always said to people, how do we take employees, trust them with multi-million-dollar projects, but we can't trust them to book an airline ticket or a hotel room in the best interest of the organization? That makes no sense to me. So I'm always like,
Yeah.
how does that work, right? We want to just like squish everyone into this box and like little lanes of people conforming to whatever we say. Educate them, treat them like adults. And what's going to happen is you're going to find out more about your program and what it actually is really truly costing you when you have more insight into all the different channels that people are allowed to book and how you can manage that data better. I can't stress that enough. You don't have any idea what's going on in your program, probably.
Hey, Jen,
Jen, we have
how
collected
much time-
so many quotable statements from you today. I love it. Sorry, Greeley, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Jen, how much time do you think you spend on enforcement? I remember when I was a buyer, if I added up my time of one-on-one meetings, if I added up the time on the exception reporting that we were always trying to get right, the reason codes with the travel agent and all this stuff, if I added up all that time on enforcement, it probably was like 25%, maybe even more of my time. So, and I would rather use that more strategically, right? So how much of your time do you think you spend on enforcement?
I can say this, for me, I'm lucky. It's probably under 10% of my time.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because I am a CTD, so my agents are doing a lot of that enforcement at the time of booking, right? So I have that control, so I can kind of do some more of that. But so that gives me an advantage. Certainly, I think if I was in an environment where, I had a TMC and I've worked in those environments before, certainly you're spending a lot more time just because, because you don't have that insight as close as insight. Yeah, you're just chasing things down. And you know what?
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what those reason codes are for people not doing what they're doing. They can validate. They're just picking the one at the top of the list. They can explain themselves away all the time. So it's, for me, it's a waste of my time, honestly.
Yeah.
It's not going to change anything.
If you're a buyer out there thinking like, this sounds fantastic, but my organization isn't there yet, to fully trust travelers. Well, trust yet verify. So start with getting all of the data from all these different channels that are happening, whether you like it or not. Embrace it, and then use software to analyze that data, not spreadsheets and not more layers of people.
Or your time.
Your
running from place to place. So you have the ability now with technology, like Traxo Smart Hotel Rate, to be able to identify, which is the first step. How are you going to do anything when you don't know what you don't know? So that is, that's a very good point. I appreciate that, guys. I want to circle back to the Q&A. And before we jump into that, I want to say to Susan Lichtenstein, your partner Greeley, about the comment, omni-channel is happening now. I love it. So one of the other events, I was trying to start a hashtag omni-channel happens. And on our last webinar, I said I'd like to create a bumper sticker that just says omni-channel happens. Because it is happening.
People ask you what it was. I told a friend today I'm doing an omni-channel webinar, and they're like, "Huh?"
Right.
It's omni-channel.
And then we had someone else, comment that omni seems to mean one, which I can see that. Honestly, the word omni means all.
It means all.
That's the actual definition of omni. So it's all channel. But I agree. We can come up with a better way to define it, maybe multi-channel or something. I don't know. We'll have another think tank about that. But let's go to the Q&A. So I've got a few questions here. Let's start with Sue Schroeder asks, Jen, is your in-house travel agency your employees or the TMC employees? What percentage of your travel is booked with the company tool, online tool?
So they are our employees. So we are an ARC accredited corporate travel department with one office in the US and one office in the UK. So we service about 90% of our total travel spend through the CTD. And they are our employees, and we have about 90% online adoption.
All right, thank you for that. Marla Sander asks, if I book the negotiated rate in GDS, can I assume the hotel gives them the rate as confirmed? Whoever wants to answer that.
You can assume that it, maybe 25% of the time it doesn't. It really depends on the company. It depends on the hotel. We see huge ranges in hotels and our customers. Some hotels are maybe 90% accurate. For example, one near a headquarters. Others, we can see 60% of the rates are wrong, and sometimes they're 200% higher than what you've negotiated. So you absolutely need to get a handle on it. That's where the $15 billion a year in waste comes from that I mentioned at the start.
Very good.
And
Anybody else want to comment on that?
I just like to add one comment on that. So because the rates are loaded in the GDS doesn't mean they necessarily stay in the GDS all the time. Rates drop out all the time. So even if your travelers are going into your booking tools or with your TMC, that rate could be gone. They're booking something else. They don't identify it. And you may not know that it's actually dropped out of the GDS as it is. And you may never find out because you may never look at the expense report and know that they paid a higher rate. So, it just, how do rates drop out? It just happens. That's a mystery still waiting to be solved. So
it's part of that onion.
Sometimes you just feel like you can't win. So Donna McGovern asked a question for Jen. Did you add or change wording in your travel policy with this new data about leakage? Or maybe another way to say that is, are you going to if you haven't?
We are working on the policy right now, actually. So need a complete revamp.
Fantastic. So Sue Schroeder followed up with, how do you handle travelers that are able to utilize or request the clients that they are visiting hotel preferred rate that could be lower than your company preferred rate?
So
I'd like to hear an answer from all three of you, because you all three have different perspectives on this. So sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, so we just require that we can book it on their behalf with the client rate. So we just manage that for the travelers themselves.
I think it goes back to the statement that was made earlier, right? Not all leakage is bad, right? Some of it, especially if you're a professional services company, accounting services, consulting, tax, whatever, where you go out and you visit a lot of clients, chances are the client's either going to say, use our rates when you come visit us, or you're going to their office and they probably have a preferred hotel, that offers that company rate. So, it's not saying that all leakage is bad. It's saying what we need to do is understand those cases where there are multiple rates to choose from, our preferred rate, the client's preferred rate, that we look at that and figure out, okay, which is the best for that particular business trip. And I think that's where you always have to look at and make sure that the policies are flexible, because it goes back to what Jen said earlier, right? Sometimes you have to leave that to the travelers, say, look, you've got to do what's right for that particular business trip. Is it client facing? Is client billable? Whatever the case might be, so you have to have that. So it's not saying that everything that goes outside the system is bad, but it means that you need to look at that and compare to make sure you're still doing what's right for the company or the client.
Right. Very solid answer, Greeley. Thank you. John, what about your perspective? I'll repeat the question real quick. How do you handle travelers that are able to utilize or request the clients that they are visiting hotel preferred rate that could be lower than your company preferred rate? Oh, you're on mute.
Could you just say the last part again? I was answering someone's question.
Multitasking.
Yeah. So she asked, how do you handle travelers that are able to utilize or request the clients that they are visiting with their preferred hotel rate that could be lower than your company preferred hotel rate?
Okay, yeah.
Or your client's preferred hotel rate in this case. Right.
So that's another layer of complication, another reason to have all of this, laid out in a nice, dashboard. So I would say first, get yours under control, but then because the travelers are putting in a rate code from your partner or client, we can track that, and it comes through Traxo, so we can create a separate reporting or dashboard showing you the comparison, if that's something that's valuable. Hopefully that answers.
Great. Thank you very much. So Beth, and I apologize, Beth, if I'm getting the last name pronounced wrong, Heckett, I think, is asking, and she says, I'm newer to travel management, so I apologize if this is too basic, but how do you go about identifying travel leakage that isn't talking to everyone that you see that books a flight or rental car without booking a hotel through your booking tool? I'd like to take a second to answer that question real quick before I pass it over to you guys. But Beth, I would highly recommend at the end of this webinar, I'm going to be talking about our upcoming Lunch and Learn session. I'd recommend checking that out. But then I'm going to pass it over to, we'll start with, let's say Greeley on this question.
Yeah, say the question again, just make sure I'm understanding.
Right, so she says she's newer to travel management,
Yep.
and she's just wondering, how do you go about identifying travel leakage that isn't talking to everyone that you see that books a flight or rental car without booking a hotel through your booking tool?
Yeah, and I think, you know, in these types of situations, it always comes back to data, I think, right? You need to be able to analyze your data. Now, there's many sources of data, right? You've got your book data through your TMC, but, you know, as Justin was saying, you've got other data coming in, Traxo and others, and then you've also got your expense data and you've got your credit card data. You know, part of the challenge is, you know, being able to consolidate all this data to really figure out what the complete picture is. And there's, you know, a lot of entities that can help you do that. And I think that's really, you know, a good place to start is by looking at your data to understand what is really going on. And then from the data, what I always found that was helpful was then if I could identify the data, I could identify the outliers and figure out who those people were. Was it a certain division? Was it a certain area of the company? You know, was there a reason for this? And then start to drill down into it. But I always started with trying to understand the data as best I could and build the picture from there, and then start to narrow it down to you could actually get a really good understanding of what your travelers are doing and what they're facing.
And Beth, I
If you
really
want a
appreciate
high
that
level,
you asked. Sorry, I was just going to say
sorry,
real
Justin,
quick.
I was just going to say, go ahead.
Beth, I really appreciate you asking that question, because essentially what you're asking is what today's webinar is about. You know, so if you are spending the time trying to track everyone down and identify everyone, you know, that's what these tools and technology are available for, so that they can do that for you rather than you taking the time to do that. You know, so tools like Traxo, Smart Hotel Rate, and the other things that, you know, the panelists today are mentioning that's the concept that we're bringing up, is that all the time spent for travel managers and travel buyers trying to chase this information down, to Jen's point earlier, can be saved with technology today. We have gotten to the points where we can actually do something with that. Sorry, Jen. Just wanted to address that real quick. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to give her a really quick down and dirty piece of advice. Just look at your GL, compare it to your book spend, take your book spend, add about 23% for taxes and fees, and then see where that gap is, and you'll be able to see that you're probably at 40% of total spend is not going through your program, something like that. But that's the easy down and dirty. And then once you realize that you do have a problem, and everybody has a problem, everybody has the leakage. Don't tell me you don't, you do, you just don't know about it yet. So go out there and find it. But that's probably the down and dirtiest, easiest way to figure out what is in scope, and then use the other resources to take the deeper dive.
Jen, I think when we're done here, our team is going to have to go through and go minute by minute of every time you speak on here, because you have so many quotable things, you know, to be able to utilize there. I mean, it's true, and you know, it's time to shoot straight and, you know, do something about it, right? But any other parting thoughts, parting comments from the panelists? I think we've gotten through the Q&A, and I will reiterate to the audience, the Q&A feature is open. We actually, this is like a unprecedented for us. Not that the word unprecedented has been overused at all, but it is unprecedented for us to actually have a buffer of time, you know, to where we've gone through the Q&A. So if anybody else has any other thoughts, any other questions, feel free to put those in the chat or in the Q&A, but I will circle around to the three of you for any parting thoughts. Start with Jen.
If I could give one piece of advice to the buyers on the call or on the webinar, is don't be afraid, right? Don't be afraid to investigate and find out what is really happening in your program. It's not a reflection on you, whether you're afraid that you're going to uncover all this stuff, and then all of a sudden, you know, your gig is up because all of a sudden you don't feel like you're managing the program as much as you should be. By taking the deeper dive into it and thinking about the bigger picture, you actually become a more strategic player within your organization. and understanding and presenting your travelers with probably some options that might be a little bit more delightful to them is going to make you even more of a hero to them themselves. So don't be afraid and don't ignore it, would be my advice.
Great. Greeley? Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I think my parting comments would be, now is the time. Unfortunately, we've never been in this situation where we don't have travel really taking place right now, right? Volumes are down for most companies. Jen, your company's still out there and traveling, supporting everything with the pharmaceutical side. A lot of companies, have seen their travel go down to zero or less than 10% of what it used to be. So now's the time to really look at this, look at your onion, start to figure out what layers can you peel back and what can you do so that when we start to come out of this, that you've got the most efficient program that is set up really for the future, because there's going to be so many things coming down the road that we've heard about for years that are really now coming to fruition, whether it's blockchain, whether it's new technology, traveler identification, universal profiles, all these things now, the technology is really catching up. And so I would encourage you to use this downtime to say, let's look at our onion and then let's use some test cases. If we've got some people out there still traveling, let's try some things right now because the risk is minimal as far as dollar exposure. But the benefits that you'll receive, you'll get the feedback from your travelers, you'll still have the duty of care, all these things that you want will still be there. So use this downtime, take advantage of it, and really work to get your program set up for the future to take advantage of all the technology that is now available today.
Thank you so much, Greeley. I appreciate that insight and thought, and definitely agree. Now is the time. I mean, while we have the time, let's take the time.
Yeah.
John, any parting thoughts, comments?
Yeah, and I would just say DigiTravel is fantastic at helping companies do exactly that. And I'd add that not only is now the time, it's never been easier to do this because of the technology that we have. Easy to get started with Traxo, easy to get started with Smart Hotel Rate. And there's even ways, I won't do a commercial, but corporations can get our product for free if they're booking hotels directly. So this technology is opening up all kinds of different business models as well. So there's no reason not to get started now.
Yeah, and in closing from the Traxo side, I think it's important for us to note that we are the data providers. We are the data aggregators. We do not take a position as to how you run your program. We're not trying to encourage you to do one way or the other. We realize that there are different methods for different companies, and one size does not fit all in this case. So the way Jen runs things is not necessarily the way that might be best for your company or culture. And so on and so forth. So while we remain agnostic to how you run your program, we are here to provide that data. So I want to make sure that that's known to you as the travel buyers and suppliers, but also to our supplier friends and partners as well. So let's. I'm going to jump right in to close out the webinar. Thank you so much to the attendees. You guys have been great. This is a fantastic discussion. We certainly encourage any follow-up or questions or thoughts. As a reminder, we do have a short survey that we would be grateful for your feedback. So the link is here on the presentation, as well as we'll put that in the chat. And you could have the chance to win a $40 Amazon gift card. And so if you've enjoyed the past and today's office hours webinars, please keep an eye on your inbox for the details on our next webinar. And finally, who said there's no such thing as a free lunch? For those of you interested to learn more about what and how we do what we do here at Traxo, we invite you to register for one of our upcoming Lunch and Learn events. These events will be taking place bi-weekly starting on February 12th and are designed to give travel managers and buyers an opportunity to sit in on a Traxo demo in a more informal group setting. And to make this time more of an experience for you, we'll be providing food delivery gift cards to all of those who register. So registration will be capped at 25 attendees per event, so please register as soon as possible. And for more information and to register, visit us at the link provided in the chat, and thank you. We hope you take advantage of the chance to see Traxo in action while enjoying lunch on us, and thank you so much for attending today's webinar. Have a great day, everyone.